Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're going to give everyone a few more minutes to log in and get settled, and we'll begin the webinar in about 2 minutes. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Getting the Most Out of the Latest FocusVision Decipher Innovations. A few housekeeping items before we get started. You'll see 2 different ways to communicate with us throughout the webinar, the chat box and the Q&A box. Please use the chat box for all technical issues and the Q&A box for any questions related to the content of the webinar. With that, I'd like to introduce our panelists for today. First up is Zoe Dowling, SVP of Research at FocusVision. An eclectic blend of researcher, technologist, sociologist, and marketer, Zoe uses her extensive research expertise to help clients best apply FocusVision's technological solutions. Next, Aaron Ju, Research Director at FocusVision. Aaron is responsible for providing research support and helping clients to stay at the forefront of market research trends. Last, but certainly not least, Denise DeAndrea, Vice President of Technical Sales, also at FocusVision. Denise conducts interactive product demonstrations that highlight software capabilities and product features and is an integral part of assisting prospective clients with technical inquiries. At this time, our presenters are going to turn off their cameras and jump right into the presentation. Zoe, would you like to get started?
I would. Thank you very much, Rachel. Thank you very much to everybody for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're coming from. I'm really here going to just be saying a few opening words, and really Aaron and Denise are going to be taking you through, I think, some really great content today. What I will start with is really setting the scene, and you're here to listen about some FocusVision Decipher innovations, and what was the genesis of this, and where is this coming from, and where are we coming from as a company? Well, I have to put on screen, this better, faster, cheaper. This is the mantra that has been going on for more than a decade, and it's not going away. This is the new normal. We need to deliver insights that are better, that really help you understand your customers, think about how they think, feel, and act. You've got to do this faster. You can't wait sort of 4-6 weeks for the result of, say, a message testing. If I'm going back to when I first started in the market research world, that was maybe the turnaround time of an ad test. And today, that is not what we're looking for. If you've got messaging that you want to understand how it works, then it's got to be a much quicker turnaround than that, and cheaper. We're time strapped, but we're also really very much resource strapped. And so you've got to be, you're very much aware of where every penny or dollar is going. And so this is the mantra, that this is the beat that we're operating on. I've already said normal. So at FocusVision, we really are constantly working on innovating our platforms to meet the needs of you, the transformative researcher, and operating in these challenging conditions. We firmly believe that the role of technology support the researcher and help you to get you to the ultimate goal. That is cost-effective, timely insights. And timely also that you've got time to think about it, to do what makes you, what you're here to do is to think about the bigger questions that the technology can't think about. So this is what we've done. We've, in some of our recent innovations, we know that surveys are one of the easiest ways to, and quickest ways to speak to your customers directly and hear their voice. And everybody across the organization is wanting to understand the customers. Maybe it's recent experiences, satisfaction with products or services, monitoring brand metrics, the score. There's so many different ways that we can and should be talking to our customers. And yet sometimes it's not as quick and efficient as we would like to do it at that survey creation survey creation stage. It can often take far longer than you hope. And the design phase for the questionnaire often takes place in collaboration from several teams within Microsoft Words. Again, if I go back to my experience and the experience of most other researchers that I know, it's like, hey, everything starts in Word. And you say, what does this draft questionnaire look like? What are the questions that we want to ask? We're going to send it off to different stakeholders to get their input. And then we'll have that final Word document that we send off to programming. So this takes a lot of time and back and forth. And of course, then programming takes time. So with the latest FocusVision Decipher innovation, we've included functionality that helps you start with Word. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And one thing I just want to point out there is that there's actually now, build your survey your way. How do you want to get started? Do you want to get started from scratch? If you've got a very long, complex questionnaire with, it's going to have multiple languages, that's going to have multiple routings and nested quotas and so on. Maybe that's something that you want to just, I'm going to start building from scratch. That's something we've always offered. That's something, of course, it's there. We've also got the ability to start with a template. Again, if it's something really great to start from that sort of an initial starting point. And I'm going to leave because Aaron's going to talk about that a bit more in a moment. And then, of course, the start with Word capability, where you can literally drag and drop your Word questionnaire into the Decipher platform, and it will, using AI-enabled technology, automatically detect the question types and answer options, transform them into an online survey that you can review, check that everything's working right, make adjustments, modifications, but it's giving you a fantastic starting point. So that's what we're here to talk about today. We're going to have first, Aaron is going to talk about some best practices to keep in mind when building your survey. I've always said the technology can do great things and wonderful things, but it does not replace you as a researcher, as the person who is building the survey, who's thinking about what questions do I want to ask? What questions are going to actually get me those insights that I need? And how can I ask them in a way that keeps our participants engaged? And so I thought it's incredibly important to put this up front and have Aaron talk about, here's some best practices to think about in terms of templates, dropout triggers, and then we're going to have a little note and wording that I am going to jump in on. And then I'm going to hand over to Denise, who's going to give you a hand-on preview of what these latest FocusVision Decipher innovations look like. So the build it your way, the 3 ways you can build your survey, and a quick look at Sample Marketplace, which is an innovation we released about 2 months ago now. So these are all ways that you can get into field quicker and faster and hopefully more cost effectively. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Aaron, who's going to take you through some just things to reminders on building your survey.
Thanks, Zoe. So I'll start the conversation by talking about our survey templates that we have available for use in Decipher, and expand a little bit more about what this is, because this is going to be a great starting point and resource for getting started with your surveys and building them out and designing them and so forth. We have almost a dozen templates right now, and we'll be adding many more over the next several weeks in Decipher, but these are essentially fully programmed surveys that we have pre-built in, and they're designed to address some of the common research and business questions that we see for surveys. We have a survey such as the ad tests, brand awareness, customer satisfaction. You can see the full list there. And all of these templates were written and designed by in-house research experts that we have here at FocusVision. So many years of experience have gone into these metrics and questions that you see that are in the survey templates. And these have all been culled and tested from successful projects in the past and based on standard best practices within the industry. So, so if one of these topics align with your research objective, you could theoretically select one of these survey templates. You can make any sort of tweaks or minor adjustments to it. But these should, really help you get quickly started up and running with gathering and collecting data from customers. And so you could select a template, immediately launch, and start collecting data for your surveys. And so these are really a great starting point to take a look at it, and when you're building and designing surveys and when you're getting started. Even if you don't use the template as the basis for your surveys, these are great for just getting ideas to take a look and see different examples and different options of how things can be done. You might be able to grab bits and pieces of the template for your survey. Whether it's an interactive question type you might have not have seen or known before. These are, we use different question types and alternatives and the different looks and feels and themes for a survey within these templates. So, if you see something you like, you can grab it and copy it. So just some interesting things there to poke around and play with. I think these provide great examples for you to check to see if there's anything that you can apply for your surveys. So templates are a good starting point to get your creative juices going when you're starting a survey and thinking about how you want to put that together and what it should look like. I know I always draw from past projects that I've done before for inspiration for my next survey. So the templates can serve that purpose as well. Check these out, and if you're unsure how to design an ad test or a customer satisfaction survey, definitely draw on the templates to use. Then the next thing I want to talk about in terms of building out a survey and getting started designing one are design principles and general guidelines to consider. In particular, when we build surveys and we ask our questions, we want to make sure to do it in a way that is engaging and hassle-free for our participants. There are just so many things that technology has allowed us to do to get customer feedback. Excuse me. There's just so many great things that technology has allowed to do to allow us to get customer feedback faster and more efficiently than ever before. But it's also important to remember that there's a human behind the interaction. Somebody's taking our survey, and we want to provide them with a positive experience with our brand. So an area of research that I've been particularly interested in is what triggers a person to drop out of a survey. And not everybody starts our survey. Not everybody starts when it finishes the survey. Many people drop out and abandon the survey partway through, and there are certain triggers, maybe question types or aspects of a certain type, survey design that cause people to disengage. And what are those? This is an area that we should all pay attention to and really consider, because when we struggle to recruit people to complete our surveys, that's more field time and recruiting costs for us. And then there's the potential for non-response bias in our survey data as well. If we have a high number of people dropping out of our surveys, that means we may be missing people whose opinions matter to us. So one of our top goals, should always be to design surveys as we're starting to think about, building them out and the types of questions that we want to ask and how we want to ask. Our goal should be to provide and put together a survey that's user-friendly and engaging. That way we can maximize our participation levels, and we hope that an engaged participant also means better data quality from them and more thoughtful and well-considered feedback from our customers. This graph that I'm showing here illustrates the work we've been doing at FocusVision to understand survey dropout triggers and what causes people to engage or disengage from our surveys. This is a page-by-page analysis of a 19-page survey, where the green bars show the dropout rate at each page, and the black line on the charts shows the time spent on each page. And where the dropout rates and or the time spent on the page is high, that should raise the question of what's going on, what's on that page, what's the content? Is there something unusual about the design or the question type that's triggering a relatively high dropout rate? So what I like to do in the next couple of slides is take a look at the contents of the pages here that I underlined in red as an example of the kinds of things I've been seeing over the years of doing this type of page-by-page dropout analysis and surveys, many surveys to see patterns and kinds of things that we see in the content of survey that triggers a spike in the dropouts. Typically, what we see is on the intro and the first page, a pretty standard setup for a lot of surveys, and no different from this case example that I'm showing here, where you have introductory text and then maybe a gender question to start out here. But without fail, almost every survey that I've looked at and have done a dropout analysis on, the highest and majority of your dropouts will occur within the first 2 pages. And this is without fail, and I think the reason for this is people are kind of in a checkout phase for a survey when they first start it and get into it and really haven't committed themselves to taking it. We can speculate that the typical approach for someone taking the survey may be to click on the link, check it out, and immediately within the first 10 seconds form an impression. It's almost like they are just poking around to see if it's worthwhile or interesting enough for them to follow through on. And it turns out there are things that you can do to hook people in and capture their interest right away with the survey and get them committed to continuing on. But let me come back to that later, and I want to show you. So there are other examples of contents on the pages where we see high dropout. So, page 4 and 5 of our survey example here, we saw a list in the dropouts in the dropout analysis chart. Open ends are typical dropout triggers, as these require additional effort on the behalf of the participant to fill out. However, from a research perspective, obviously open ends can be a rich source of unstructured feedback for us, allowing people to elaborate on their feelings or narrate a key insight. So you probably don't want to avoid avoid open ends altogether. They may increase your dropout and because people just don't want to take the time and effort to fill this out. But like I said, they're a rich source of information and feedback from our customers when they do fill it out. So, just be mindful of the number of open-end questions in your survey. Make open-end optional. Maybe just include a few. And if you do need, more than that, keep a close eye on participation rates while in field, should you need to make any kind of adjustments. Questions with a lot of rows or answer options are another source of dropouts. I see this a lot, causing an increase in dropouts in the survey when you have a question with a lot of word, a lot of row text. This is simply cumbersome for the survey participant to look at and read. So keep the number of rows in your question to a minimum and try to simplify your writing so that surveys can be more user-friendly. Lots of times we can reduce the amount of text that we have to make our point. Here we have a grid question. This is a well-known dropout trigger, especially if it's a repeated grid series where we're asking someone the same question multiple times with the only change being the brand that is being rated here. One thing we can do with grid questions, I know, they're often found in a lot of surveys. We know they cause survey fatigue, but it's such an ingrained part of how we do research and process that, for some reason, it's just so hard to avoid. But one solution is you can use interactive questions as an alternative to a grid. Research has shown, and again, that's something I'll talk a little bit more about later. Research has shown that in interactive question, you can achieve better data quality and participation rates with something other than a standard grid. But the main point here, is really, to maximize or minimize the number of repetitive tasks that you have in a survey. If you make it overly tedious, that'll drive people to abandon it. Here's another example where dropouts were relatively high. This is a 3D question. The participant here is asked to indicate the gender, age, and education of each member of the household. Not only is this visually daunting when you see it, but just a lot of information packed in here that we're expecting the respondent to address. These type of questions should be avoided entirely whenever you have a task that is very busy, requires a lot of input from the respondent, is something you definitely want to avoid. For this particular question, it probably would be better to gather the same information in smaller bites over multiple pages. So 3D question, it's very onerous. Definitely avoid those altogether. There's a different way to ask and gather this type of information. These are probably some of the more common drivers of dropout that I showed examples of. And I think anywhere where you put extra burden or load on the survey participant, whether you make them read more or have a lot of input areas to click on or touch tap, something that's repetitive, you risk wearing the person out. So be mindful of what you ask respondents to do. I know it's important for us to collect all kinds of data, and we have many questions to ask, but there's obviously a limit on what people have tolerance for. So what I want to do is spend a little bit more time on the two things I said I'd get to, the two areas that I've highlighted here, grids and maximizing participation on the first part of the survey, because these are topics for which we've done additional research on and that I'd like to share and highlight the findings of. So I was involved in a bit of research with a client of ours, and what we were trying to do, or what our aim was transform an existing tracking survey into one that was much more mobile friendly than what we had. And I'm showing a screenshot here to give an illustration of what we did. A lot of the transformation to a mobile friendly survey was simply making sure the input areas were large enough for touch tapping on a smaller screen. We increased the font size and the text to make sure it was more readable on a mobile device, and we cut down on areas where there was too much clutter, too much text, where the question type was just too busy, would spill over the width of the screen, so that all parts of the question would fit and display nicely on a mobile phone. And by doing all these things, moving from a non-mobile friendly survey to a mobile friendly survey, we're able to produce and improve overall the survey participation rate among mobile users by more than 30%. So a big improvement there, making those sorts of adjustments. But one of the really interesting things that we found, and I wasn't expecting this, was when we looked at the page-by-page dropout rates for the old survey versus the new mobile optimized one, you can see, and I circled there, most of the improved participation was gained over the first 2 pages. You can see some improvement in the dropout rates in the latter part of the survey when we went to a mobile optimized survey. But by far and away, the most powerful effect of transforming an entire survey to be mobile optimized was the impact of the dropout rates on the first 2 pages here. So essentially, as I talked about before, the importance of the first 2 pages, making a good impression. By transforming the survey to a mobile friendly one, what we essentially did was, we established that good first impression that encouraged people to continue past the second page and commit to finishing the rest of the survey. So for any survey, I really like to stress the importance of making this good first impression on the respondent when you're thinking about maximizing survey response rates. Hit them with something cluttered and confusing. That's just going to set the stage and tone for the rest of the survey. Hit them with something clean and professional and fancy. They might feel that they can do more and continue on. This means for the first 10, 15 seconds of the survey, you should really work hard to engage the respondent and not turn them off. If you have any questions that require a lot of reading or thinking, save that for later. Make early questions visually appealing and easy to fill out. Avoid open-end questions early on. Cut down on the length of text, lengthy introductions, and move simple single select questions up front. Essentially, all the dropout triggers that I just talked about and showed examples of, even if for some reason you can't avoid them, just make sure not to put them at the beginning of your survey. So the last thing I'll talk about before I hand it back to Zoe is a recent research and research study we did in partnership with Merits Consulting and Dynata, and you can find the full paper and presentation for this on our website resource library. But let me briefly share with you some of the highlights from that. One of the tests we did in this research was to investigate alternative question formats to the standard grid. As I mentioned, we see these a lot in surveys, and they're just so ingrained in the process of how we do research and design surveys that, even though we know it can lead to survey fatigue, we still put them in. But the standard grid is just not a mobile-friendly question type. It's not really designed to fit within the confines of a small mobile screen, especially when you hold it in portrait mode, which most of us do. So this will definitely trigger dropout, among mobile users. What we did with our research was we tested two different alternatives to the standard grid, what we call button select and card sort, and these are both interactive question types available in Decipher. And you can see how the two alternative designs offer a more mobile-friendly format. For the button select, the numbers are placed inside, the scale label numbers are placed inside the button boxes, and the scale is repeated for each row label. And then for the card sort design, that's an interactive question type where a single scale is shown in static position, and when one item is rated, the next one slides across the screen. So again, both are formatted to be mobile friendly and fit nicely and easily within the smaller screen of the mobile device. So we tested all three. We had a sample of over 2,000. A third of our sample took a survey using the standard grid. A third took a survey using the button select design, and a third saw the question with the card questions using the card sort question type. And we compared all three in terms of various data quality and survey engagement measures. And it turns out card sort performed really well and the best out of the three. Not only did it have the highest completion rates, but the lowest straight lining performance and the best data consistency between mobile and desktop. For straight lining, for those of you who don't know, that's a situation where the participant rates all the items using the same scale point. So giving all 5s for everything, for example. Normally we prefer to see some variation in scale used for the different items that are being evaluated. That's just an indicator that a person is, that can be an indicator that a person is carefully reading and considering all the choices rather than just speeding through the survey. So generally the less straight lining, the better. And we also want to see data consistency for desktop and mobile devices. So whether you're taking the survey on a desktop, tablet, or smartphone device, it really shouldn't matter. Your answers to the same question should be the same. So if they're not, it's likely the device itself or how the survey is rendering differently on that device that is causing that data difference. So it's a good thing if we can see consistency across devices, and the card sort design does very well in that regard. So it's definitely a good alternative to the good formatted question that we highly recommend, especially as a mobile-friendly alternative to the standard grid. So that's some of the tips there and some things to consider and avoid when building out and designing your surveys. Think about ways, to make the survey taking experience less cumbersome, more enjoyable for participants. Don't overburden them with tedious exercises and so many things to read. I know we all have lots of questions and feedback we want from our customers, but keep things simple and to the point is often the best way to approach it. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Zoe, who will talk a little bit more about question wording within surveys. I know this is an area that she's really passionate about. Much of our time is spent with surveys is simply writing the questions and answer options, and she has some really great tips on how to approach this. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Zoe.
Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, I wanted to add in a word on wording because I am exceptionally passionate about it. I've done quite a bit of work around question wording over the years, and it is the one thing that I really do believe that can make a huge impact, and I've seen through research can make a huge impact on just your overall participant engagement rates and how they're responding as they go through the questionnaire, as they go through the survey. And I have had in previous roles done research, and they're seeing that if you shorten down your questions, it doesn't necessarily mean that your data is going to change because people don't read. Having been, and if anybody's had this experience as well, I've been in sort of usability eye tracking testing with people going through surveys, and you can see that actually they might look at the first maybe 2 or 3 words of your question, and then their eyes quickly go down to the answer options because they're really using that as the cue of what you're asking them. So if we move on to this next slide, what we can see is basically what I'm saying is shorten and simplify everything. This is going to do wonders for your dropouts because basically think about the survey length, the question length, the number of response options, and of course question wording. And within that, it's really there's a sort of a rule of thumb: no longer than 10 questions, or 10 by 10, no longer than 10 questions. If only our surveys were that short. What I meant was that there's only no longer than 10 words for your question and no more than 10 response options. Again, hey, just a rule of thumb. It doesn't always work like that, of course. But just sort of a challenge to think about, this is a micro tweet, and you're looking to get the wording as simple and as concise as possible. Don't use unnecessary words, avoid jargon. We get so wrapped up in our world and be it in the words that we use within our category or our sphere of knowledge. And that is not the world that your participants are generally going to be inhabiting. So what is the everyday language for it? And how can you be, just as straightforward? And then be consistent. Consistency is incredibly helpful. People get into a flow as to, as they're going through the survey, and that helps them, it speeds things up. And of course, you do want to balance that with a little bit of a change so it's not overly repetitious. But there is some certain things that you should be consistent on. So, if your scales are going one way to the other, don't, so positive to negative, don't suddenly switch it from negative to positive for no reason whatsoever. You're throwing them off and you're potentially tricking them to a degree. So, just be consistent. As I say, though, if there's one thing I can leave you with, please think about reducing the length of your questions, particularly now in mobile. We have shorter attention spans. We do things quickly, shorter period of time to answer surveys. So the shorter and the simpler things can be, the better. So there's me. I'll get off my soapbox on that for now. And I know we'll be excited to have a look at what building your survey your way looks like within the FocusVision Decipher platform. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Denise. And before I do, I'm just going to remind you, please do put questions in the Q&A. We'll have a few minutes at the end to answer those. But yeah, let's go over to Denise and see what this looks like in the platform. Thanks, Denise.
Wonderful. Thank you, Zoe. Welcome, everybody. So what I'd like to do is take you through the 3 different ways to build it your way in the Decipher platform. And what I'll first start with is start from scratch. I'll then move on to starting with a template, as Aaron had mentioned, and then we'll talk about starting with a Microsoft Word document. Now, for those of you on the call that have never seen the Decipher platform before, as always, very easy to start a survey from scratch. Click Start from Scratch, name your survey, and then click Create. Now, what this will do, this will take you into the survey editor itself and will prompt you step by step of how to start your survey. Very simple. The toolbar across the top will help you sequentially through the survey, and adding elements is easy as click on add element, choose your category, and then choose your question. So in this example, the card rating question that Aaron was speaking of, very easy to add. You'll see it's pre-templated, and now I can see that question in all three views: mobile view, desktop view, and as well as device view here. So here's my tablet view, and here's my mobile view. Okay, so that's the first way. Let's talk about starting with the template, which essentially will get you started faster for pre-selected. And as Aaron mentioned, we have about 12 different templates to start with, and we recently added HR templates. If I want to start with a template, click on Start with a Template, and your templates are here on the left side of the screen. And as Aaron mentioned, even if you're not going to use this exact template, use it for an idea. Use it to get you started there. So click on the template you want, the bottom of the screen, name it. So we'll call this, once again, the example survey. And then when you click create, what the difference is here is, rather than starting from scratch and having a blank screen, you'll see that the template we chose is automatically fed into the tool itself. And then you can customize even further from that point on. Okay. Now the third and last one that I want to show you is starting with Word, and this was released just last week, and we're really excited about this feature. What it will do is let you program your survey up to 4 times faster. Now before clicking it, what I want to do is bring up the Word document just to give you an idea of what I will be importing into the tool. As I scroll through, you'll see about 11 or 12 different questions. What you'll also see are in introduction and at the end, a conclusion, so to speak. And I want to show you how those will get imported into the platform as well. So let me minimize that. Now, what this tool is doing is it's using artificial intelligence machine learning, so it can detect what questions are being brought in. So let's show you how easy it is to do. Literally click Start with Word, drag and drop your survey over, or click Browse, whichever you prefer, and then name your survey. So once again, we'll call this example survey, and click Create. Now, before it goes into the survey editor, it's going to take you into an intermediate step, because remember, it's reading through your content and it's identifying those variables. So it's either making them identifiable or unidentifiable. The top of the screen, you'll see that summary. You'll notice that it's brought in 12 identified elements and 2 unidentified elements, and basically those are the introductions that I showed you at the top and the bottom of the screen. Now, as I scroll through, what's really fascinating here is I can take any question type, click on the icon on the left of the question, and change it. So for example, suppose it made it a single select question and I want it to be a multi-select question. It's as easy as clicking, and you can change the questions as you want. You can also take those unidentified objects, the ones that are there, and you have the power to decide to do what you want with those. So perhaps you want those to be comments, or perhaps you want those to be notes. Decide what you want them to be, and notice your summary of the screen will be updated. So now, you've imported your 12 questions, very easy to do. It's going to increase your programming, as I mentioned before, about 4 times faster. Let's click the import button to see how it looks. Before importing, it'll give you a summary screen. It'll say, hey, listen, I found 12 identified objects, 1 note, 1 unidentified object, and you have the power to decide what to exclude or include. Simply click on proceed, and this will take you into the survey editor, which you're familiar with now because we've seen it 2 times now. All of your questions from the Word document have now been imported and are on the left side of the screen in the question tree. The note, I wanted to purposely show you, the note that you changed is also imported into the tool because we told it that we wanted it to be imported. From this point on, now you can finish creating your survey, add in your extra questions, and so on. So each question you can click on and make your modifications, and certainly add more questions if you wish. So that's our Word Importer tool, where you can start with Word. and start your programming even faster. The last thing I want to show you, and it wasn't included on our slide, but I wanted to talk about, now that you have your survey in the field, you can actually use our sample marketplace to order your own sample. Now, this was released, it's our new innovation, about 2 months ago. And picture you're a DIYer. You're programming the survey yourself. You need a bid for sample. We calculated that it takes about 12 steps to order that sample, whether you're emailing back and forth, emailing for bids, getting multiple emails back, and so on. Let's make it easy for you without leaving the tool. Within the survey editor, or wherever you're at, even if you're in the reporting section, you can easily go to, it's called the participant sources, and easily order your sample. When I click on participant sources, it'll show me all of my sample sources I have in this particular project. But what it will also enable me to do is purchase sample. When I click on purchase sample, it'll ask me a couple of questions, and very familiar questions. How many participants in your survey? How many days will your survey run? What's the length of the survey? Your qualifying rate, or perhaps you can call that incidence rate if you wish. And then if you're collecting any PII information, those of you that don't know what that is, personal identifiable information or not. All of the information that you're collecting there, notice it's populated on the right side of the screen. But we haven't ordered the sample yet. You can really trigger and target the sample that you want to order. So in this case, let's say I want males of a certain age group. I can add a target. There's predefined targets here, notice in your list. So let's choose those males, and there you go. I can also add other targets. So for example, let's add, in addition to males, I want a particular region. Maybe I want everybody from the South, or maybe I want all 4 regions. What the tool will also enable you to do, in addition to targeting, is distribute your sample evenly. So if you remember, I had 1,000 participants. If I were to click even distribution, it will distribute it evenly for me. And then certainly you can click on get prices and then get your prices for your sample and order it accordingly. So with that, that's the sample marketplace, and I wanted to show it to you. I'm going to hand it back to Zoe, and we can finish up for some questions.
Great. Thanks, Denise. That was great. We have a few minutes for some questions. There's a few that I'm going to get to, so if you have anything pressing, please do put them in the Q&A box. There's one, is the remote recording going to be shared? Absolutely. It will be sent out by email, but it's also going to be available in our resource library. So the first question I'm going to answer, and I'm going to take a stab at it first, because I think this is an interesting one, is why isn't the default for question numbers 10, 20, 30, 40, etc. instead of 1, 2, 3, 4? So it's easier to insert new questions and keep them all in numeric order. The first thing that I thought when I read that was actually the way that I like to design my questionnaires now is, instead of using numbers, because you don't actually have to, you can use labels. So I prefer descriptive labels, so like age or gender, that, using the most straightforward ones, or imagery. And that enables then that you aren't, if you're inserting a question, you're changing the order around, which you saw Denise demo, that's actually very easy to do within the platform. Then you're not having to worry about, you've moved question 2 to question 5, and then everything's, or you're adding in question 5, A, B, and C. And I also find it helps on the analytical side. So that's just my initial response to that. You can number it however you want. So I'm not sure, Denise or Aaron, if you've got anything to add on that.
Right. So right now it will keep the default question numbers as starting sequentially with Q1 and onward. And then certainly you can, like you mentioned, Zoe, change those question labels as you see fit once you're in the platform. Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to, there was a question around how can we check the straight line from the data? Is there a way to auto-create the variable?
Okay, I'll take that one too, Zoe. So yes, we do have a setup that you can easily add in to check not only straight liners, but also speeders. So a simple calculation, for example, your straight liners can be checked across rows. It can be checked across columns. It can be checked across both. So very easy to do. Simply add that code into your setup and you'll be able to identify your straight liners. And then you have the flexibility to decide what you want to do with that respondent. You can decide to terminate them if you wish. You can decide to keep them in the survey, or perhaps decide to skip them to a different section of the survey. Or maybe even pop up a message letting them know that they're straight lining. So all of that is available to you in very simple logic that can be added in.
Great, thanks, Denise. Question around the templates. Is there any way to preview the templates with their questions without creating them as a survey on your own server? So I think that's really just around, can you preview the templates and their questions without actually creating a survey?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So it depends if you're using the Start with Word feature or you're starting from scratch. But regardless, when you're in the platform itself, we do have a theme editor. And actually, one of Aaron's slides showed the different themes there. What's nice about it is all the themes are mobile compatible, and you can click on whichever theme you like to see, you know, hey, do I want the education theme? Do I want, you know, the CX theme? Which theme do I want? And you can view it. So certainly that can be done without programming your survey at all. You can do that as first step if you wish.
Okay, great. And I think you've just answered a question here. Is it possible to change the look of the survey to include brand logos and colors?
Absolutely, yeah. And in addition to the templates, as Zoe just mentioned, you can add in a background image, you can add in a logo, you can customize your buttons and so on. So the answer to that is yes. Okay, great.
A question around the questionnaire word tool. What happens to the instructions to the respondents and scripting team when uploading the questionnaire, the document?
Well, the instructions are going to be unidentified or objects, so you have the ability to add them in or not. What you saw, what I did in my demonstration is I changed those to notes, and then I chose it to get added in. Now, a note will not be seen by the respondent, but will be seen by the programmer. If you want the instructions to go to the respondent, then I wouldn't make it a note and I would make it a comment, and a comment would go to the respondent. So really, you have the ability to change it to either or.
Okay, great. And I think you've again answered this, but there seems to be quite a lot around programming notes. So to use word import feature, do we need to remove all programming notes before import? And the answer, as you've said, is no.
No.
Yeah. Yep. Great. I'm just looking, sorry, that there's kind of questions in both sides. I'm trying to see if what I've missed here. I think it's around, there's one last one that we'll have around Word document import. Features great. In case of unidentified question types, if I assign a question type to an unidentified one, will the system learn about my selection and apply it next time?
Okay, so the model, the artificial intelligence model, we've used over 15,000 questionnaires. So when it reads through your Word document, it can figure out the questions that are going to get imported. And you can imagine that's just going to get better over time as the more questionnaires that we use. So the more you use it, the better it will get, and it will be able to identify those objects.
Okay, great. Thanks, Denise. And so very last question, just around on the sample marketplace. Is sample available in the US only or internationally? And I think if I'm right now is US, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So US, but we'll definitely be looking to expand that. Look, we're just coming up to time here. There's really some great questions in here. We'll be sure to follow up, but please also feel free to be proactive and reach out to your representative, who would be more than happy to answer your questions, show you anything further about anything we talked about today, and give you the answers and information that you require. So I will say thank you very much for everybody for joining. Really appreciate you spending the time with us today. And thank you very much, Denise and Aaron. I think that was really helpful. I certainly enjoyed hearing about both sides of it, the methodological aspects, as well as what we can actually do within the platform. So thank you very much. And over to you, Rachel, to wrap things up.
Great. Thanks, Zoe. And thanks so much to you, Aaron and Denise, for joining us today. Unfortunately, it looks like we've reached the end of our time together. If there were any questions that didn't get answered today, like Zoe said, we'll follow up soon, or you can email your account representative or webinars@focusvision.com, and we'll respond to your question at that time. We hope you enjoyed the webinar, getting the most out of the latest FocusVision Decipher innovations, and we hope to see you in the future. Thanks so much. Have a great day.